I'm contacted frequently by people who fancy themselves as buy-to-let or investment property moguls. Irish people especially, have a fascination with property, and the attractiveness of this idea of being a landlord and having a bunch of buy-to-let properties bringing in passive income and tenants happily paying the rent and happily paying, therefore, the landlord's mortgage is one that appears to be particularly attractive. And I'm surprised by the number of young people who would contact me looking to get onto the buy-to-let ladder when they're only 21, 22, 23. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious, but when I was that age, I wasn't looking to buy a house to let it out. I was looking to do other things. And I would suggest for a lot of young people that buy-to-let might be something that they might do later in their life, not early on in their career, in their budding entrepreneurial career. But in this talk today, this discussion, I want to just have a look at a very interesting case there that came up in the Irish Times this morning. It's reported in the Irish Times. The heading of it is, "A landlord is at his wits' end 2 years after serving a notice on a tenant." So he served a notice 2 years ago to get the tenant out. He's a 63-year-old man from County Louth, from Drogheda. Seamus McKenna is his name, and he was in before the Residential Tenancies Board Tribunal in relation to the termination notice, which the tenant has now challenged as being ineffective or unlawful or invalid. He served a notice 758 days ago. But this will give you some food for thought, I think, in terms of going into being a buy-to-let landlord with rose-tinted glasses and with optimistic, very optimistic, rosy, positive views about it, because the reality is quite different. And the fact of the matter is, this man is 63 years of age. He served the notice 758 days ago, and he still doesn't have possession of his property because his tenant has nowhere to go. And it's ended up back at the Residential Tenancies Board, and the Residential Tenancies Board has told the parties that they will issue a determination in due course. Even if Mr. McKenna is successful in his determination, the likelihood is all he's going to get is a determination to end the tenancy, and in order to give it practical legal effect, he'll actually have to go to court to get an eviction order, if it goes that far. But just looking at some of the details, it would give you food for thought. He gave the tenant notice to quit 758 days ago. He's said that his family is under a lot of financial pressure. He had to sell the house. He had a good relationship with the tenant. He wanted to give her as much notice as possible, and he gave her 180 days notice, along with the necessary statutory declaration that the house would be sold. And the tenant then was asked about her grounds for appealing this notice. She said the reason why is that I still didn't get a place. Last month I did ask my landlord for a reference because I was promising 2 places that I went to view, but still I didn't get lucky. So she's appealing the validity of this notice, but the ground she's putting forward as to her appeal is she hasn't got a place. If you think about it, the fact that she hasn't got somewhere has absolutely nothing got to do with the validity of the notice. And if her appeal is on the basis of the invalidity, the alleged invalidity of the notice, then she should be putting forward some grounds for that, some evidence for that, and not saying that you can't get somewhere else, because that's a completely different issue. And quite frankly, Mr. McKenna, as he says, is not a social worker, and it doesn't have to bear the responsibility of housing persons in society. The state does. So she's had difficulty. I sympathise with her, and but I sympathise with Mr. McKenna as well, because he's 63 years of age. He's had a good relationship. He has offered to sell the house to the council if they could keep her in it. There was no reply to this offer. COVID restrictions then didn't help. Bottom line is, he says, I don't want to be in this position today. I'm 63 years of age. I'm not getting any younger. There have been a lot of implications for me in the last year, 2 years, and for people because the tenant didn't move out, I believe have been legally compliant. Closing the hearing, the chairman, Niall Buckley, said the tribunal would issue its determination in some weeks. This is the reality of letting property in Ireland. It's all very well having a positive, rosy view of a series or a chain of buy-to-lets with people paying the rent happily, but the reality is quite different, and the reality is that terminating a tenancy is difficult. It can be technical, legally technical, and if there's any invalidity in the notice or in the process or in the steps or in the notice that's given, notice period that's given, then it'll end up at the Residential Tenancies Board with a determination in favour of the tenant, in which case the landlord can do nothing. Even if the landlord is successful and gets a determination in his or her favour, he then, in order to give it legal effect, if the tenant stays put, must go to court and get a court order to evict the tenant. So, as I say, Mr. McKenna there, Seamus McKenna, 63 years of age, served a notice 758 days ago, and he still hasn't got his hands on his property, still can't sell it. Can you imagine if you were absolutely financially strapped, you were under pressure from the lender, you couldn't pay the mortgage, and yet you cannot turn over or dispose of your property in order to relieve yourself of some of that financial pressure? That is something that should be considered when you are considering getting into buy-to-let investments, etc. in Ireland, because quite frankly, the law and society generally, and an attitude generally about housing and the housing crisis, which is very unfortunate, is such that it's created an environment that makes it very difficult for landlords to get a good return here by comparison with, for example, landlords in the United Kingdom. And that's why, quite frankly, a huge number of landlords have left the market over the last number of years, and that in turn then is exacerbating the difficulty with the housing market, because it's putting pressure on supply, it's reducing supply, landlords are leaving, and who could blame them? Hope you find this useful. If you do find this video useful, I would appreciate if you hit the like button down below, give it a thumbs up. It's good for me and for the channel that YouTube sees that the videos that I make do receive reaction, response, the interaction, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for engagement to give a good signal to the YouTube algorithm. We're all about the algorithms these days, aren't we?